with your camp counselors, Lorde Starfox, Barb Hartman, and Brian Barber.
Produced by Barber and Starfox Radio.
Welcome to Camp Nightmare Fuel. I want to welcome my fellow camp counselors, Lorde Starfox and Brian Barber. How are you guys doing tonight? Lorde Starfox, how are you?
Miss Hartman, it's always good to sit down and link up with both of y'all for sure. I am, long story short, just trying to clear off my stacked up table of things I need to attend to. Just been working on a music video where a friend of mine put some music together. She was singing, so I put her vocals up in, and then just trying to get caught up on, well, I think I only have 15 hours left of things to filter through on my Google Drive before I can finally actually put episodes out on time. So what about you?
Well, that's really great, and that is very admirable because, you know, I'm just like, it's all good stuff. It's just busy, and it seems like every time I take a recorder out, and again, this is all good stuff, I keep getting some potential evidence. So that's no complaints. It's just, it's just all backed up. And then I get discombobulated, like, oh my gosh, what do I want to do now? What do I want to look at now? What video do I want to? So anyway, but it's all good stuff. It's just my ADHD brain. Brian, what have you been up to? You've been getting some fantastic results in your area.
Yeah, the dream come true area, right next door to my grandma's old property.
That's cool.
It was funny because yesterday I went out to get a recorder that I had put out Thursday, grabbed it and realized the recorder had been physically turned off by the switch. Thought it was odd, so I turned it back on, thinking I had just not turned it on and wasted it, but realized that there were over 2.5 hours of recording on it. But it had a full battery life still. So I said, heck with it. I'll put it back and, I'll pick it up tomorrow, which would have been today, and go out to get it today with the owner of the property, and the recorder is gone. So as I'm looking for it, the owner says, well, you're stepping in all the big footprints, and realize that there's 17 or 18-inch footprints leading up to the tree with the recorder and then past the recorder. So I'm guessing they picked it up and took it with them.
Wow, that's amazing, because we were talking about before the show potential animals like a raccoon. No, I don't see a raccoon doing that. That's a lot to be able to pick up a recorder and then take it out of the bag and whatnot. It just hopefully it'll turn back up for you though. Right?
Right, because like we mentioned before show, ironically, I used 2 straps of Gorilla Tape around the bottom and the top. So it wasn't going anywhere without force, and yet It's gone. The Gorilla Tape was still on the tree.
Amazing. So tonight, we have a really super creepy episode for you. You guys and the listeners, you may or may not be familiar with the animated stop motion musical fantasy titled Tim Burton's The Corpse Bride from 2005. Tonight, I'm going to share with you the gruesome story of the real Corpse Bride and what happened when one man's lifelong obsession with a woman transcended her death. Now, I do want to warn our listeners that this could be very triggering, and there's a lot of just gruesome and disturbing details, and so it might be too much for you if you're sensitive to that kind of stuff. So just please be warned, and not something you want to have your kids listen to at all. So George Carl Tanzler was born on February 8th, 1877 in Dresden, Germany. Tanzler grew up in the German Empire, but at some point he traveled to India and then later to Australia. As World War I broke out, Carl had been in Australia for 10 years. And British military authorities placed him in a concentration camp for quote unquote safekeeping, along with many prisoners from India and China who were also prisoners of war. Carl Tanzler was captured and kept with other Germans in Australia in internment camps and prisons. Again, supposedly for his own protection and safety because of his German ethnicity. Shortly after the end of World War I, Carl was released, but because no prisoner of war was permitted to return to his former residence, he was shipped to a prisoner exchange system that was in Holland. Around 1920, Carl was finally released, and he immediately went back to Germany to try to find his mother, with whom he had no contact with since the beginning of the war. He found her safe, but he remained with her for 3 years, where he also met and married his wife, Doris Schaefer, who bore him 2 daughters, Aisha in 1922 and Clarissa, who was born in 1924. After witnessing the chaos that followed in the wake of the war, Carl's mother suggested that her son and his family follow his sister to the United States, where they would just have a better quality of life. Tanzler emigrated to the United States from Germany in 1926, sailing from Rotterdam on February 6, 1926, to Havana, Cuba. And then from Cuba, he settled in Zephyr Hills, Florida, where his sister had already emigrated, later joined by his wife and his 2 daughters. In 1927, he took a job as a radiology technician in the U.S. Marine Hospital in Key West, Florida, under the name Carl von Cosel, leaving his family behind in Zephyr Hills, which is about an 8-hour trip in this day and age, but it would have been a lot longer of a journey time-wise back in 1927. But why did Carl change his name to von Cosel for his new job? Well, personally, other than that he didn't want people to track down his family, his poor wife and his daughters that he abandoned, he from an early age, like his childhood in Germany and even later while traveling briefly to Genoa, Italy, Carl reported having visions in his dreams from an ancestor who was a noble countess. Her name was Anna Constantia von Brockdorf. She lived from 1680 to 1765. The dreams and the messages between the two of them, they had very special meaning and significance to him. He was convinced that these messages were from Anna, his long-lost relative, who again had passed away in 1765. Carl claimed that through these visions, his relative Anna had revealed to Carl of his true love was actually an exotic dark-haired beauty. He became obsessed with the thought of finding his soulmate. Because Anna Constantia von Brockdorf was also known as the Countess of Cosel, he adopted the name Carl von Cosel, which he preferred to be called by. Tanzler was quite the eccentric character, and he must have made an impression on the locals in the Keys with how he carried himself with a huge sense of self-importance, and he briskly strolled about the town with an ornate cane, and he was always dressed in a dapper manner. He would show off wristwatches claiming to be commissioned to him by the Tsar of Russia. He also claimed to have 9 university degrees, including several medical degrees and licenses. Now, Tanzler was never short on money either, as he collected a military pension for his involvement in World War I. But the extent of his military service, it's never been fully revealed. We only know that he was a prisoner of war in Australia for a time. However, his wife Doris and other extended family members would later claim that Tanzler had no royal lineage whatsoever and that his title was merely one that he created himself. Though Carl Tanzler had extensive knowledge of medical, radiology, and X-ray technology, it would later be proven that his medical degrees and all of his licenses were actually forged. But I don't want to get ahead of myself in the story, so I'm going to continue. On April 22nd, 1930, while working at the Marine Hospital in Key West, Tanzler met Maria Elena de Hoyos. She was born in 1909. She was a local Cuban-American woman who had been brought to the hospital by her mother for examination. Tanzler was immediately taken with Elena, as she was a beautiful dark-haired woman. and he felt that she was the same one that was revealed to him in his earlier visions from his long dead relative, Countess Anna. For Carl, it was love at first sight, and a meeting that Tanzler felt had been foretold for many years. On the day they met, Carl was 53 years old and Elena was nearly 21. Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyos was born in Key West, Florida in 1909. She was the daughter of local cigar maker Francisco Pancho Hoyos and Aurora Milagro. The couple had two other daughters, Florinda, who also was known by the nickname Nana, and Celia. According to accounts from locals and family members, Elena led the life of a normal teenager in the 1920s. She was a very devout Catholic who enjoyed going to the movies and out dancing with friends and in the local social clubs, and where she would also sing. Elena loved cooking for her family and friends. She was said to be extremely beautiful, shy, quiet and shy, but she was a very talented and accomplished singer. In fact, she was so popular that tourists would actually stop her on the streets and ask her to have their pictures taken with her. Now, as was customary in those days, Elena married Luis Mesa at the young age of 16. And within a few years, they were soon expecting their first child. Unfortunately, she miscarried their baby boy, and soon after, Luis left her and moved to Miami. This was just the beginning of the tragedies that would mark the rest of her young life. Soon after the loss of her baby and the breakup of her marriage, Elena came down with a cough, and she was just in a general state of unwellness and extreme fatigue. Her family believed her physical state was likely the result of her tragic losses, but they became alarmed as her medical condition and her cough grew worse every day. Upon arriving at the Marine Hospital in Key West, Elena was subsequently diagnosed with tuberculosis, which is, it's a disease that was typically fatal at that time. And it actually would eventually consume the lives of almost all of her immediate family. Carl was now known as Carl von Kosel. He was immediately obsessed with her and fell deeply in love. Once she was diagnosed with tuberculosis, he took it upon himself to do whatever he could to, quote unquote, cure her, and he offered his services free of charge. As Elena and her family were poor, they were desperate to find a cure and were initially willing to accept his offer. Tanzler formulated potions and tonics, and some he made out of gold, and he would shock Elena by connecting electrodes to her body from a small transformer that he carried around. He also gave her medicinal wines that he had concocted. He also kept a wingless airplane on the hospital grounds that he called Countess Elena, which he used as a laboratory of sorts to come up with her treatments. I'm not sure about the validity of the rumor that Carl claimed he and Elena would someday fly away together, but he also was said to make claims that the plane would be amphibious, as its ability to sail on the water and fly, could do both of those things. So I'm not sure about. I'm sure we know that of course it wouldn't do that. But whether they're just wild rumors or he was just, a madman, which that's entirely possible too. On the night that Elena's older sister, Nana, was married, Carl is said to have proposed marriage to Elena. Elena's mother was said to have fallen into a fit of rage, and she promptly threw Tanzler out of the family home. Elena did not reciprocate Tanzler's feelings whatsoever. Prior to the marriage proposal, when he would express his abundant love for her, she would repeatedly tell him he was too old for her. And additionally, she was not yet divorced from her husband. According to Nana, Elena's older sister, Elena never loved Tanzler, and she only tolerated him because their mother told her she should be kind to those who were kind to her. She looked upon von Kosel as a grandfather type. When he suggested marriage or a relationship that was anything more than platonic, she told him he was just too old enough to be her grandfather. She said she didn't love him, nor would she ever, and she was still married. Following the persistent talk about a romantic relationship and the marriage proposal, Elena's family just instructed Tanzler just to stay away. They'd also kind of grown to dislike his unorthodox treatment methods, and they were starting to question, what is he doing? And they really particularly did not like what they called was his use of devil machines to treat Elena. They even went so far as to move from their home, and of course, they did not share their new address with Tanzler. But he was very persistent, and every night he searched the streets for information on the whereabouts of the love of his life. Finally, one fateful night, a sympathetic neighbor told him the location of their new residence, and Tanzler immediately went there. Now, at this time, unfortunately, Elena was gravely ill and she was very close to death. So her family conceded and allowed Tanzler to resume treating her. They were at the point there was nothing else that they could think to do. So this began a constant struggle of sidestepping constant marriage proposals so that Elena could continue with treatment. Now, let's not forget that while this was going on, this jerk also had a young wife and 2 young daughters who he had essentially abandoned and was completely neglecting. In fact, one of his daughters diphtheria at the young age of 10, while some of these events were unfolding. So as Elena's treatments continued, so did the conflict between Tanzler and Elena's family. And in the end, it was said that Elena hating Tanzler. She had not only rejected romantic advances, but also endured his painful and completely experimental medical treatments. Now, despite Tanzler's best efforts, Elena died of tuberculosis at her parents' home in Key West on October 25th, 1931. Carl Tanzler paid for her funeral, and with the permission of her family, he commissioned the construction of an above-ground mausoleum in the Key West Cemetery, which he visited almost every night. He also arranged to be the only one that had a key to the mausoleum. Now, Carl Tanzler claimed that Elena's spirit would come to him when he would sit by her grave. Many times he was said to have serenaded her corpse with a favorite Spanish song or recite poetry. He also claimed that she would plead for him to take her away from the grave. She did not belong there and she wished to be with him. Some reports also claimed that he actually had a telephone placed in her mausoleum so that the two could call each other whenever they wished to communicate. One evening in April 1933, 18 months after Elena had passed, Tanzler crept through the cemetery where Elena was buried, and he removed her body from the mausoleum, carting it through the cemetery after dark on a toy wagon, and he transported it to his home. Carl would later claim that he opened the mausoleum and he opened her crypt and got access to her coffin, where he saw that he was alarmed at the rate of decomposition in Elena, which led him to believe that the undertaker had not properly embalmed her body. And now he wanted to make sure that her body was kept in as pristine condition as possible. This is what he was saying, as if he's doing her, a favor. He's being kind. He attached the corpse's bones with piano wire and fitted her face with glass eyes. As the skin of the corpse continued to decompose, Tanzler replaced it with silk cloth soaked in wax and plaster of Paris. As the hair fell out of Elena's decomposing scalp, he fashioned a wig from her hair, which he had previously obtained from her mother. Tanzler filled the corpse's abdominal and chest cavity with rags to keep its original form. He dressed Elena's remains in stockings, jewelries, and gloves, and kept the body in his bed. Tanzler also used copious amounts of perfume, disinfectants, and preserving agents to mask the odor and to forestall the effects of the corpse's decomposition. Tanzler lived in secret with his corpse bride for 7 years. However, the citizens of the local community grew more and more suspicious of his behavior. Why was he continuously purchasing women's clothes, jewelry, perfume, and other toiletries when he appeared to be living alone without female companionship? It makes me wonder what they would have thought if they had known about the 2 daughters and spouse that he had essentially abandoned back in Zephyr Hills, and that he was still legally married to his wife, Doris. It's also widely reported that around this time, a young man delivering newspapers claimed that he had seen Carl Tanzler dancing with a large doll in front of his fireplace, right there in front of his window. Big window in his home for everybody to see. Now, Elena's sister Nana caught wind of this. She had heard rumors that Carl had fashioned a life-size doll that was an effigy of her sister. So 9 years after her sister's death, Nana confronted Carl Tanzler at his home. And it was discovered by Nana that he had taken Elena's body from the grave, reconstructed it with various materials, and kept it at his residences, which included that wingless plane, a shack on the beach, and a cottage. The authorities were immediately notified, and Tanzler was subsequently arrested on the charge of wantonly and maliciously destroying a grave and removing a body without authorization. So a hearing was held. A psychiatric evaluation of Tanzler stated that he was in a borderline state, but otherwise he was sane and mentally competent. It was the biggest media frenzy, as you can imagine, of its day. He actually had fans that traveled to the Keys to give him gifts and treats. Public sympathy in the media portrayed him as an eccentric romantic, and there was even an attorney who offered to represent him pro bono. Most disturbing of all to me was that Elena's body was put on public display and was said to be viewed by almost 7,000 people at a local funeral home. Just prior to that, a thorough examination of the body was performed, and there was evidence of abuse of a nature. And it was found that Tanzler had fashioned a product that he put into Elena's corpse so that he could regularly practice necrophilia on her corpse. Now, unfortunately, the charges against Tanzler were dropped as the statute of limitations on the crime had expired. However, the judge decreed that Tanzler should no longer have possession of Elena's remains in spite of his audacity and insistence that she be returned to him after all that. She was then buried in an unmarked grave by an undertaker, a cemetery sexton, and the chief of police, all of whom supposedly took this location to their graves, as the secret was never to be revealed. It was said that her body was dismembered and its pieces locked away in several different locations to prevent Tanzler from ever having access to any of it. Tanzler moved from Key West to Zephyr Hills, near where his wife and his sister live, but not before supposedly using a time bomb to blow up Elena's tomb the night he left. Tanzler lived his remaining years in Zephyr Hills, living close to and being supported by his wife Doris. In 1952, he was found by the police on the floor of his home with a wax replica of Elena by his side. And that is the conclusion of The Real Corpse Bride. That is, talk about nightmare fuel. I think it's like one of the most, I literally can't even imagine. What do you think about that, Starfox?
Yeah, that's some pretty gnarly stuff right there for sure. And Mr. Barber, my guy, in a second, hopefully you can bring a little bit more bizarreness to this. Yeah, that's just disturbing on all levels. I don't even know where to start on that. I know there's been other heinous people throughout existence that have done very similar things to that, which is what Leatherface is based off of in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, for example. A lot of people don't realize there was no chainsaw involved in that. That Texas Chainsaw Massacre is actually based off of Ed Gein. Anyone can look up Ed Gein and the things that he did. Mm-hmm. Well, it's pretty much on the same level of this Looney Tune that you were just speaking about right here. I don't know who's more insane. The fact that the things that he was doing, I mean, we all know that, well, unfortunately, science is beautiful. At the same time, though, a lot of things we've learned about in life, you would like to think there would have been a morality aspect to that. Yet in actuality, I mean, how does anyone think we learned about the inside organs of humans or animals? Again, you would like to think there would have been a morality aspect to that. Yet anyone can go look at history, and some of the people that have progressed medical science, well, they weren't so much being keen on the morality aspects, right? A lot of things were done on mammals and such. Well, they were still very well aware of these experiments and such. So I would like to say that I am surprised by any of this, yet some of the things I just listed right there go to show you how, on a whole nother level, people are absolutely scrambled upstairs and straight up Looney Tunes for sure. I mean, there are so many things that are based off of real people. I mean, you're sitting there talking about them buying, or him buying the female clothing. All I can think about is that creepy dude in Hannibal Lecter's movie, right? The first one with Jodie Foster.
Right.
Where the guy, Buffalo Bill, is just sitting there dancing while the woman's down there. That's based off a real person as well. So again, I mean, the list just goes on for how disturbing people can really be with what happens in Silence of the Land. Again, though, he himself in that is based off of some, brilliant people that, well, again, did some things that are crossing morality line, meaning, well, people can piece it together. I enjoy eating vegetables and such. Well, these individuals enjoyed eating things that weren't vegetables, all right? Just bizarre. Barber, my God, what the heck do you think, dude?
Well, we already said this wasn't for kids, right? So I understand the whole science aspect, and when people donate their bodies in order for certain things to happen. I myself has somebody as Achilles a tendon, as a bicep tendon now, because of people doing things after people are dead. But you got to be a full-blown whack-a-loon Looney Tune in order to be boinking your bride who hasn't breathed in 9 years. I mean, seriously. And then to sit there and for people to be fans of that.
Yeah, that's so
scary part.
Terrible.
People are supporting that. So there's more than one of them out there, because it sounds like you've given the chance. The fans would have done the same thing if they could have thought of it.
Yeah, the media portraying him as a hopeless romantic and eccentric. He was just so much in love with her, but like it's so gross. Not only from like the obvious, you're taking and doing all this. That's unbelievably disgusting and gross. But this young woman's body, you're defiling it. She had and told him repeatedly that she had no interest in a romantic relationship with her. So it's really kind of just, that adds a whole layer of like, ick. Horrible.
Two things I got to say to that real quick would be, one, that unfortunately to some people out there, no means yes, meaning I don't know how many times I've seen that throw my existence with dudes when girls are like, nah, I'm not about that. And they're like, yeah, she's just playing hard to get. Next thing you know, there's bozo slap with like a stalking order because, she doesn't want to hang out with you, man. And also to talk about what you were just speaking about the other day. I mean, look at what I presented in your chat about fan people. All right, with who? The Night Stalker? I mean, this woman or whatever decided to make a whole fan page to Ramirez, and people like that. And I don't know. It's just a very bizarre world. Again, you can look at any person that went to prison, whether it was Manson or other people, and if you listen to security guards talk, there was so much mail that was withheld from them from fangirls and such. Bizarre.
Yeah, I don't understand that at all. That's sick.
Yeah, I mean, it's like he literally had it in its head. We're destined to be together. Yes, you're saying, no. Well, guess what? Maybe not in life, but now your afterlife is going to be spent with me.
Yeah, and it's just very sickening and very unfair. Now, there was even more disturbing details on people had made claims, and I didn't even want to go down this rabbit hole, but that he had actually, when he was giving her these drinks, like he was trying to hasten her demise. But like I said, I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole. This is horrific enough, right?
Yeah, it makes you speechless, and it's crazy depths people will go to, not only for control, but I mean, I love my dad, but I'm not going to dig him up and prop him in the garage. So I got spiritual advice from beyond on how to rebuild a carburetor. I mean, and the fact that he was claimed sane, and I don't understand how the statute of limitations of what he did to the body or to the person who wasn't breathing can be expired because he was still doing that to that person. So
Yes,
I don't
why would
understand
you?
that.
Right, like why would there be a statute of limitations on that? I mean, because he still had her body, like you said, and was still living with it as it was his wife. And then for him to have the audacity, well, now can I have her back? Like, are you? Oh, geez. Whoa.
Yeah. I mean,
What?
thankfully the spirit wasn't there, but still, for the family, what that would put them through now, knowing.
Yes.
What the heck? All I got to say to the audience out there, if you really want to get a very valid depiction of this, go watch Rob Zombie's House of a Thousand Corpses. All right. That movie seriously traumatized me the first few times I saw that in my younger teenage years. All right. And if anyone wants to get some good visuals and some really messed up stuff as to some of the things we're referring to, that movie is going to show it to you all right there. It's got pretty much everything we've spoken about tonight occurring in this insane family in Texas.
Whoa.
Well, not only that, but other things, if people are actually interested in this, I mean, as legitimate scientific things, they take people who donate themselves after this life, how they train cadaver dogs. And that's how they train their forensics teams by using the rate of decomposition, under various conditions. So, if people
is it the Body Farm? I forget what state it
Yeah.
is. Yeah, North Carolina maybe, and they have put bodies in different various situations to study the level of decomposition.
Yeah, thanks to my high school for that, by the way, just to complain for a second, making me go to some very strange body museum where literally, you know how when you go to like Spencer's and flip through the posters, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's normal, correct? Okay, but they have like these flip posters of a body just sliced all up, and I'm just like, yo, dude, Mom, thanks for signing the paperwork for this. I would have rather been doing homework. Awesome.
Well, they had that. There's a guy who's using that for art now, and it's actual people. And I can't remember the guy's name, but he was here at NMC and Northwestern Michigan College. And they had that exhibit. And I got to admit, I was freaky enough that I'm like, I'm going to go see it. And it was creepy, to say the least, of the way he position people as far as like being able, it looked like 3D anatomy charts, because it would be, the top, you'd see the muscle and it would be labeled as art for the, attachments and origins and insertions. And there were dozens of these things. So literally dozens of people on display. It's like, I don't think I could do that to my family. No,
and you also wonder, like, if somebody's donating their body to science, was that something? You wouldn't really think that was in the agreement, but I would think that he'd have to have, had secured permission, but oh gosh.
I don't know if there's any paperwork that suggests that. You literally just select the box. That's it. I mean, on the back of my ID, it says you want to be a donor or not. That's it. It doesn't say what portion we're going to use or what we're going to do it for, but do you want to be a donor? Okay, yeah, sure.
Right.
Again, assumptions aren't good, but this is science as well. And yeah, like Brian said, what the heck though? What sick people send your students there to learn about that? Last time I checked, I didn't want to ever become a medical student when I was in high school. I don't see how that was beneficial to traumatizing me, but yeah, for sure.
Oh, it's worse than that, my friend. It's actually considered an art exhibit and travels around the country, going to different places, and it's literally considered artwork. So these people's bodies got donated for art, not even medical.
Yeah, that's just a whole nother level of disturbing. Again, I don't even know how to mention this here. I'm an artist, all right? And when someone wants to look up the definition of what art is, a lot of people are just going to assume, again, assumptions aren't good. We're talking about paintings or artwork. Yeah, no, that's not really necessarily the term of art. There is another individual. I'm not going to give this guy any clout. Anyone can look it up. His idea of art is, well, using paint and then projecting it from, well, let's just say the back door aspect, okay, on pieces of paper with all these different colors, and people buy it for millions and millions of dollars.
What
So
in
again,
the world?
we're talking about art, and art's a very vague term, I feel,
Yeah. Well, he has a whopping following of 84. So, oh no, 35. No, 35. He's 35 followers. Gee.
35 sick people, yes.
I'm going to be blinking colors and then just knowing where that came from.
Right? You have to add some humor at the end of it, but it just, again, ties into everything we just spoke about, though, just how all right. One of the last things I can say that makes a ton of sense is morality is based off of culture and is based off of regional areas of the world. All right. Meaning something that we sitting down tonight would consider moral based is only because of the aspect that we've taught ourselves, hence morals. But when you're in another area, for example, some things that we would consider taboo here wouldn't be considered taboo in other areas because it's part of their culture. Meaning, I don't even know how to say this again. I eat vegetables. Okay. People should understand what I'm referring to here. Yes, that would be considered taboo to be doing some of the dark sides of not vegetables. But yet in another culture, that is considered sometimes blessing your family members, other times in tropical areas where protein was a shortage, it was survival. Again, it's unfortunate, but morality is only based off of the region where you are. Meaning, again, just because we think something is moral, we can go in other parts of the world and our morality is looked upon as basically Looney Tune-ish, like, what are you talking about? This is the way things are done. Again, just bizarre.
Challenge anybody to find any place in the world where digging up the loved one and covering them with wax and silk clothes is a good thing.
Horrible. Just, yeah. I don't even know. Just
yeah,
horrible.
It's bizarre. No, I was actually listening to Forrest Galante. He's the man, and also some of the scientists he works with. And then I was also listening to people that don't have anything to do with him at all, that just work in like psychology and such, and just really trying to understand that the way we present something that makes sense to us in actuality isn't going to make sense everywhere else. It's just not the way things work.
Wise words from Lorde Starfox. And with that, we will conclude tonight's episode of Camp Nightmare Fuel.
Produced by Barber and Starfox Radio.